friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Liv. If you've never been here before, thank you so much for stopping by, and I'm especially excited that you're here today because we are not only going to be talking about some of my favorite fall recommendations, but some of my all-time favorite books and even a little bit of a sneak peek into some of my favorite books so far this year. So in these recommendations, I definitely have something here for everyone. You guys know that I read a big variety of books, so I have some romance, I have some fantasy books, I also have some creepy kind of horror books. You guys know I don't read full-out horror, but if you're just looking for something that gives you the creeps or makes you kind of feel uncomfortable, I definitely have some recommendations here for that. I also love graphic novels so much, especially this time of year with the visuals, and I just cannot wait to share with you guys some of my favorite books. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. A new favorite author that I came across earlier this year is Ashley Poston, who wrote The Dead Romantics. You guys probably figured out already this would definitely be on this list because I have not been able to shut up about it. If you were to combine Schitt's Creek quirky characters, that kind of weird family dynamic, with small town vibes of Gilmore Girls, but make it creepy, that is legitimately this book. That's all I kind of want to say about this because I went into it totally blind. I did not know what to expect. I just know that we had a ghostwriter of an author that passed away, and the ghostwriter, our main character, can actually see ghosts. That is all I knew going into this book. Just know that this is not your average cutesy book. Yes, there are cute moments, but our main character falls in love with a ghost. And not only that, but her family owns a funeral parlor. There's definitely creepy little parts of this book that I loved, but there's also parts that were just so heartwarming. Not to mention there's a pretty good plot twist at the end, so I'm just gonna leave it at that, but this is my #1 recommendation for this time of year because there's so many different aspects of different genres just weaved into this book, and I feel like anybody could really enjoy this. I could not film this video without mentioning The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I know this is a very cliche recommendation that I'm already seeing a lot of on other people's channels, but I read this when I first started getting back into reading. It holds a special place in my heart, but this is one of the most atmospheric books I have ever read. Her writing is just so fluffy, but if you enjoy a little bit of a slower pace in your fantasy, you also love a good game or competition, but a little bit of romance as well. This is about a magical circus that shows up unannounced at random locations, and you don't know how it got there, you don't know when it will show up, it just magically appears. Honestly, I cannot remember all the details that are woven into this story. I just know it had a huge impact on me as a fantasy reader, and it just gives you those perfect fall atmospheric vibes. My next top recommendation that is very underrated, and I do not know why, is The Near Witch by V.E. Schwab. This book, I love it so much, and I may not mention that a lot on my channel, but seriously, this is one of my all-time favorite books. It's not only a beautiful fantasy story with amazing writing, but we also have a little bit of a love story. In this story, we have this small town village named Near that is known for the wind that takes away children and makes them disappear. It starts happening again, and they are starting to connect it to this local witch. If I'm remembering correctly, our main character's sister goes missing, and so she goes on the hunt for this witch, and she teams up with this boy who she ends up having feelings for, and it's just such a beautiful story and one of the most atmospheric fall books I think I've ever read. Also, if you've seen the movie The Village, this definitely will be the book for you because it has those same small town vibes but mysterious creature that's stealing people away. I honestly don't know why more people haven't read this book. Maybe it's because it's V. Schwab's debut debut. I'm not really sure, but either way, the writing is absolutely phenomenal and seriously just took my breath away. Going off of V.E. Schwab, I really wanted to mention The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue as well. In this book, we have our main character Addie, who makes a deal with the devil and she can no longer be seen. Everyone who meets her forgets her instantly, and it's such a sad life. But if you also love rainy, cozy afternoons of drinking coffee, going to the bookstore, our other main character is actually a bookstore owner or works at a bookshop. But there was just so many times in this book that I wanted to jump right into it because it's perfect to read on a gray, rainy day. I totally got sucked into this story. I even cried in the end. But there's just something about V.E. Schwab. Even her book Gallant that just came out with illustrations is so creepy, and I just feel like her writing in general is absolutely perfect for fall time. Next, I wanted to mention another author that I found last year that is absolutely one of my favorites now, is The Wicked Deep by Shea Ernshaw. I think I read this book in one sitting. I could not put it down. Her writing is so elaborate and detailed, but it's so beautiful. In this book, we have three sisters that were sentenced to death 2 centuries ago and were drowned in this lake, I believe. And every year there's a festival where tourists come and they want to explore this small town and see if the myths are really true. And every single year it is said that the souls of these 3 girls overtake another soul within the town and they end up killing people. So it's super creepy. So if you love on the edge of your seat kind of creepy vibes that keep you wanting to read, this is going to be the perfect recommendation. The next book that I also want to talk about, and I also think is so underrated for this time of year, I'm pretty for sure the author also came out with a book recently. That is The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones. This was another book that I think I read in one sitting. This book is essentially a zombie story without all of the gore, because we have the bone houses, or people that rise from the dead, basically as skeletons. And in this book we have our main character Rin, who is a grave digger that's kind of in charge of keeping these bone houses under control so they don't overtake the town. She then befriends a map maker who is new to this town, who has no clue what's going on, and they end up going on an adventure. They uncover old secrets, some interesting family ties, and there's just so much in this book. I could not put it down. I will definitely say the ending was more fantastical, so if you're not a huge fantasy reader, it might be a little bit unbelievable for you, but I'm just gonna leave it at that. The end even had me a little bit teary-eyed. This was a totally unexpected surprise when I read it, and I feel like more people should pick it up. Another book that I feel like I have not been able to shut up about since I read this is Anatomy: A Love Story. You guys, this book was an absolute 5-star for me. Even from the beginning, I knew right away that I was going to fall in love with this book. Hazel wants nothing more than to become a surgeon or a doctor, and unfortunately during this time period most women weren't allowed to be doctors. So she sneaks into this class and she makes a deal with the teacher that if she can pass the medical exam on her own, then he will allow her to stay in the classes and learn. So there is a lot of interesting things that come into play. This book was definitely super dark and pretty gory for a young adult, at least in my opinion, but I loved that aspect of it because this book just really went there. There's also a little bit of magical realism and also romance weaved throughout this gothic tale, and I feel like this really has sparked my interest to wanting to read more books that have gothic vibes to them. So if that is you, I definitely recommend picking this one up. And the second one I think it comes out next year, and the cover is a brain. I'm obsessed. I love this author, and yeah, I just cannot get enough of the writing either. Another gothic story that I read last year, and I feel like it's very underrated because this might be a controversial opinion, but I have not seen many people talk or even like The Death of Jane Lawrence, and I loved this. This also sparked my interest for wanting to read more books like this. In this book we have Jane, who is forced to marry during this time period, and she decides to pick this town doctor who seems like a decent man. He has money, he has buys a great house, but the night of their wedding, he turns into a completely different person. He is this paranoid, anxious guy that doesn't want to interact with her, doesn't want to touch her, just be the loving husband that she wants him to be. And let me just tell you, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. This is not your average fast-paced kind of thriller book. It's definitely very slow, has lots of vibes, and it just gives you that uncomfortable, unsettling feeling. And I personally love that. I know not a lot of people do. They like a little bit more plot or character development, but this was just such an interesting, intriguing book. I would definitely recommend that if you like a little bit more slower of a pace. I could not make this video without talking about my new favorite spooky middle grade book that has really sparked my interest into wanting to do a deep dive more into this genre, and that is The Haunting of Aveline Jones by Phil Hickes. This book was so good. I was not expecting to love this book as much as I did, and I just want to scream from the rooftops. I want everyone to read this book. I know you guys have probably heard me talk about this book on my channel before, but if you love cozy coastal vibes, but also creepiness, this is absolutely perfect. This is a classic haunting tale. It takes place at a bookshop where main character Aveline actually finds a diary of a girl that used to live in this town, and she was also paranoid. So you have interesting, creepy journal entries in this book, and there's also some illustrations which are really fun but also kind of creepy. I was totally not expecting to love this as much as I did, but I enjoyed every single second while I read this, and even though it's a middle grade, I actually got goosebumps at the end. I could not stop reading. I was scared to death for Aveline, and I need you all to pick this book up. These next two books I'm also going to mention together at the same time because it is the same author, and you guessed it, Jennifer McMahon. I feel like any book that you choose to pick up by this author is going to be perfect for this time of year. This was one of the scariest books I have probably ever read in my life, and this book is major Frankenstein vibes. It also follows a young girl that honestly kind of gives me serial killer vibes because she is obsessed with dead things. The ending had me absolutely shocked. There's an older lady that's also the doctor of this so-called care facility. So I am just gonna leave it at that because you just need to go into this one blind. I just know that if you love Frankenstein as much as I do, you are definitely going to be so into this one. This book kept me on the edge of my seat. It was so fast-paced, and I feel like it is just absolutely perfect for this time of year. If I could recommend any of these books to you, it would honestly probably be this one. This book is a little bit reminiscent of Stephen King in regards to the interesting paranormal vibes that happen in this book. It is so hard to describe without spoiling anything. The setting of this book is a small town where we have a woman whose daughter tragically passed away, and her body is then found in the field behind her own house. So you are slowly going back in time, but also being in the present timeline, kind of weaving together this story in the end and figuring out what in the world happened to this lady. This is another one of those books that I read in 24 hours because I could not stop. It was just so freaking creepy. Speaking of creepy books, I also had to mention Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. This is another underrated book that I have no idea why more people don't pick this one up, especially the audio. There are creepy sounds and whispers and voices and scratching and just so much that adds to the experience of this story. Once a year, a road appears in the forest, and at the end of it, the ghost of Lucy Gallows beckons. Lucy's game isn't for the faint of heart. If you win, you escape with your life, but if you lose, you just have to pick this one up for yourself and figure out what happens. Horrid by Katrina Leno is the next book that I want to talk about. As you can probably tell, there's a little bit of a pattern here because I love gothic vibes with haunted houses or manors. So our main character and her mother move back to this manor where she grew up, and some weird things start to happen and go bump in the night. I also really loved this book because you have some good mental health representation. This girl is also obsessed with eating books or paper, which is an actual real disorder, and I wasn't aware of it until I read this book. This book was not only super creepy, but it dealt with so many other things like mental health and feelings and working through grief, and you also get those small like cozy town town vibes as well, which is a very interesting kind of juxtaposition in this book. I don't know why it's taken me so long to pick up more books by this author, but I need to. The next book is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager, which is probably no surprise to you once again. I'm not going to go into super depth about the synopsis of this book. If you love haunted house, creepy kind of gothic vibes, if you like books within a book, if you like creepy graveyards, if you like very sketchy, interesting characters, that is all within this book, and it kept me up late into the night, really giving me the creeps, and I highly recommend reading this at nighttime because it really just makes the experience so much creepier. Out of all Riley Sager's books, I definitely would suggest picking this one up first because I think it is his strongest work. I've seen mostly positive reviews on this one and compared to his other books. If you're wanting to give him a shot, I definitely recommend this one first. So I was going to recommend And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie in this video, which if you have not read that already, you definitely need to, and I do suggest reading it before Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. If you're just wanting a book that makes you feel super cold while you read it because it takes place on the coast, I highly recommend this one because there's a storm, the power goes out, and all of the characters are starting to be killed off one by one in this book. This is not only your typical mystery of whodunit, but there's a lot more weaved into this story. You have some very unlikable characters, but you also have some very funny characters, and the ending to this had me rolling. You think you have it figured out, but I promise you, you probably don't know everything. Even though this was a little bit of a slower pace in comparison to her other books, I just really enjoyed, once again, the fall vibes and the cold chilliness I felt while reading this. Jumping right into my graphic novels, I had such a hard time narrowing this down to just a few because there's actually quite a bit out there that gives those fall feelings or just has fall themes to them. But if I recommend any of these graphic novels, it is definitely going to be the Seance Tea Party. I absolutely love this. The artwork is so freaking cute. I loved the message and story to this as well because we have our main character Laura who really just doesn't want to grow up. So she becomes friends with this ghost, and yes, there is cute little tea parties involved, but there's also such a heartwarming, sweet message. I think I've only ever cried at one other graphic novel, but this is one of the two. So if that tells you anything, this just really tugged at my heartstrings. Another one that I feel like everyone at this point has recommended is Pumpkinheads by Faith Erin Hickes and Rainbow Rowell. If you guys have never read this before, you definitely should. This book is not only a cutesy romance, but it gives you the ultimate fall vibes because in this book we have so many fall activities. They talk about fall food, which looks absolutely delicious. I've even looked up some of these recipes myself to make this fall because they just look so good, and I refuse to believe these aren't actually real things that people eat. Every single aspect of this book I loved, and it's definitely going to be one of those books that I read year after year. This one is for all my fantasy lovers out there, and that is The OK Witch. I fell in love with this series last year. If you really love the first one, good news, it's actually a series, so you can keep going with the story, and I believe there was a little bit of a cliffhanger at the end of this one too. I absolutely adored the humor in this book because of this little black cat here. He is freaking hilarious. He follows her along on her adventures and goes to school with her, but I'm also a crazy cat lady, so of course I'm gonna enjoy that about this book. But if you love those fantasy witchy vibes, I definitely recommend this one. Diving into a couple more creepy graphic novels, starting with Anya's Ghost by Vera Brosgol. This book was not only creepy, but it was super funny because you have our main character who falls into this well. She ends up befriending a ghost. The ghost in this book actually helps Anya realize some mental health issues that she has, and we even explore body image a little bit in this book. There's just so many hard-hitting and good lessons to learn in this graphic novel, and it's one of my all-time favorites still today, so I would definitely recommend picking it up. I also really enjoy the monochromatic art style, which I think is super unique. Last but not least, I definitely had to mention Grimoire Noir, because let me tell you, this ending was super creepy. You also have those rainy, small town vibes in the artwork and throughout the whole book. And in this book, we have a small town where the main character's sister disappears, and all of the women in this town are known to be witches. There is a lot to uncover in this book. There is friendship, there's a little bit of romance, there is an interesting family dynamic, kind of an abusive relationship. The story was super fun because you kind of have these two friends that have an interesting past, but they try to uncover this town mystery, and I just really love mystery thrillers, and so I felt like this was definitely the book for me. But if you also love a good mystery that just has really creepy vibes, I would definitely pick this one up. Well, there you have it, my friends. Those are my top picks for you to pick up and read this fall. Let me know if you guys have ever read any of these before, and if you agree with me that they're the perfect fall vibe. I love all of these books. I'm pretty sure I gave almost all of them 5 stars. If that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what does, but I would definitely recommend picking up at least one of these. Hopefully you got a new recommendation, but thank you so much for watching this video. I love you guys so much, and until next time.